Hey there, Elite Tier Gamers, what's going on? The Minecraft bee and bug fixing update is going to be the next major game update. This major game update has a current release date of the holidays this year. That's only a couple months away. Today, I thought it would be fun to take a look at pretty much everything that's going to be new in the 1.15 update, so far at least. So like, subscribe, I've released some brand new merch, you should check it out below the video, and let's start talking about some brand new upcoming features. So as of the making of this video, there have been 8 1.15 snapshots so far. This video is being recorded in the 19W40A snapshot. Now, 19W34A was the first 1.15 snapshot. It released on August 22nd. This is the snapshot that initially introduced bees. It was buzzing, and there will be no more bee puns. Now, this update will be for both major game versions. I've seen a lot of questions about that, but both Java and Bedrock will be receiving the update, and in fact, the plan is to release the update on the same day for both versions. And last but not least, this update will be releasing this holiday season. So now the features. What do we have in this update? Well, inside of this chest are some of them, but definitely not all at all. So we have some brand new bee blocks, but we also have quite a few other smaller changes to many existing things. Now it's time to go one by one and break each thing down. I'll do my best to add as much information as possible for each thing, but I'm sure I'll miss some things, so I apologize for that. So first things first, we need to talk about actually bee nests. Bee nests are these things hanging in the trees right here. Now these are actually full bee nests. When you place one down, or when you find one, it should look kind of like that, a little more empty. Now, bee nests are the natural home for bees. Bee nests will spawn naturally in flower forests, plains, and sunflower plains, but they will be the most common in flower forests because there's simply more trees in those biomes. Bee nests will only generate on oak and birch trees, and you must have an open air block in front of them for the bee nest to actually generate. The front side is the side with the 2 holes. That's kind of the entrance. Now, bees will fill this block with honey. They'll fly around flowers and actually get pollinated looking like that bee was, and then go back to the bee nest, go inside, and yeah, fill it up with just a little bit of honey. There are multiple honey levels. The max level is 5. Now, these bee nests can, of course, be harvested by the player. That's the point of it all. If you're trying to get honeycombs from bee nests, you'll need shears. If you're trying to get honey bottles from bee nests, you will need glass bottles. To do this, simply walk up to the bee nest and harvest it with whatever item. When you harvest a full bee nest with shears, you will get 3 honeycombs, but you'll also get quite a few angry bees. Angry bees will try and sting you. We'll talk about that a little bit more later, but yeah, it's basically a bad thing. If you'd like to harvest a bee nest without having to deal with these angry bees, you should place a campfire below it and then go about harvesting it. Campfires have a calming effect on bees and will make them not angry. Few final things to note about these blocks: pistons cannot move these things, and these cannot be harvested by hand, but they can be silk touched. If the player decides to harvest these things by hand, the bees inside of it will get angry and sting you. Next up, we have the beehive, which is pretty much the craftable version of the bee nest. Beehives can be crafted with 3 honeycombs and can house 3 bees at a time. The crafting recipe is right here, and the mechanics are all the same. Shears for honeycomb, glass bottles for honey, and then campfires to calm. Now these are both empty beehives, but a full beehive, like full of honey, would look something like this. Again, there are 5 different honey levels. These things can only be harvested at level 5 when they're full, and their appearance will only change at level 5 when they are full. When a bee nest or hive is full of honey, bees can no longer put more honey into that thing. So now we should break down the things that come from the beehives. First, we have the honeycomb. Honeycombs can basically craft beehives right now. That's just about it. So this is their only use right here. You can't eat them. You can't really do anything with them. You can make beehives with them. Now we have honey, which actually does a little bit more than honeycombs. Honey can be consumed for a little bit of hunger and saturation. Honey will restore 6 hunger and provide 2.4 saturation. 6 hunger is 3 little hunger bar things. Honey will also remove poison, but that's not the last thing that honey will do. Honey can also be crafted down into sugar, 3 sugar in fact, if you're into doing something with crafting it. If you decide to go ahead and craft honey into sugar, you will be left with an empty glass bottle and 3 sugar. So those are the bee items, but now, last but not least, on the note of bees, right now at least, we need to talk about the bees themselves because they are absolutely amazing. Bees will spawn in your world. The purpose of the bee is to pollinate flowers and, I guess, really produce honey. Bees will fly around your world until they find flowers. Once they find a flower, they'll sort of fly around it, like this one is doing here, and eventually collect nectar from the flower. Now, the nectar is just the sciencey word for it. There's no nectar item in-game. So this bee will do the flower dance, spin in circles like a crazy, crazy dancing person, and eventually will turn into that thing. Now this is a pollinated bee. Pollinated bees will fly back to wherever their home is and drop off their stuff. Inside of their home, that stuff will turn into honey. The honey can be harvested by the player. If a pollinated bee flies over crops, the crop growth will actually be spread up, which is really interesting. This also works for sweet berry bushes, not only your planted crops. To breed the Minecraft bee, the player will need to have any of the small flowers. Bees will also follow the player if the player decides to hold the small flower out, so that's how you can move bees around your world. Now bees have 10 total health. Bees are also affected by the Bane of Arthropods enchantment. If the player decides to anger a single bee and there are other bees in the area, those other bees will become angry as well and try and sting the player. The bees will fly at the player and try and sting them. The sting does a little bit of damage and also dealing some poison. After 50 to 60 seconds, whichever bee stung the player will unfortunately, they'll die. Yeah, like naturally. They lose their stinger and they'll just kind of die. Bees will try to avoid water. At nighttime and during the rain, they will go into their house. And that bee just died. Currently, it seems that bees only drop experience, so unless you're really like needing experience, you probably shouldn't kill them. So, as of the 19W40A, those are the bee features. Yes, we know about a few more, like the honey block and maybe even the honeycomb block, but those are the things that are actually in the game. Now we need to take a look at all of the other smaller but still important changes in this version so far. We will start with the always genius NITWIT. NITWITs no longer have that little leveling icon that all other villagers have on their belt. The parrot, which is unfortunately still causing game crashes for me, you know about that if you saw my 19W40 snapshot on the second channel. So I can't show this one off, but basically parrots can ride on the player's shoulder when the player is riding in an entity, so like a horse, a boat, something like that. Breedable mobs that spawn in groups in the wild can now spawn as babies. There will be a 5% chance of this happening for the pig, the fox, the cow, the sheep, and the chicken. Now, the wolf, the llama, and the horse have a 10% chance of spawning as a baby in the wild. A single boat, when put in a furnace, will now smelt 6 items instead of 1 item. This sort of just makes a little bit more sense when you think about how many planks go into a boat. Comparators can now actually detect the amount of honey in a beehive. Right here we have an empty beehive, so we have an output of 0. But if we take this comparator and set it up on a full beehive like the one over here, we should have a redstone output signal. Comparator and the redstone. There we go. This is a really interesting mechanic and will definitely be helpful for creating automatic bee farms. Rails will now place facing the player instead of just north and south. This is a small change, but a really, really nice one, at least when it comes to those little quality of life features. Iron doors now must be mined with a pickaxe to actually drop themselves. If the player decides to stand still and break the iron door with their hand, then that door is just going to go away. The player will never, ever receive the iron door. I thought this door would take less time to mine. I wanted to showcase it to you, but yeah, any minute now. Yep, there you go, no door. How sad. Stems will now drop seeds again, always. This one is a pretty big one because drying sponges out in a furnace, that's never really fun, takes a lot of coal. Wet sponges that are placed in the nether are now instantly dried out. Pistons can now push blocks over farmland that do not break farmland without breaking the farmland. So the gate can go over the farmland and the farmland does not break. Previously, if I tried to do this, the farmland would turn back to dirt. Big one when it comes to dispenser automation and dispenser machines. Dispensers can now collect honey, honeycombs, and water. To collect water, you'll need a dispenser facing water, and inside of it, you'll need to have glass bottles. Power the dispenser, you get a little bit of water. To collect honey, you'll need a dispenser with glass bottles in it again, facing this time a beehive or a bee nest. However, the beehive or the bee nest needs to be full. This one is not, so that's not going to work. Dispensers can also harvest honeycombs if it is placed in front of a full beehive or bee nest with shears inside of it. Still on the note of dispensers, dispensers will now actually fire fireworks in the correct direction. This is one that I really like, but campfires can now be unlit with shovels. Just grab a shovel and click on the campfire. Campfires can be relit with a flint and steel, but that's not new, that's always been a thing. A little feature parody thing here, bells can now be rung by REDSTONE on the Java edition. BEDROCK already had this feature. Sliding over into the technical world, a world that we're actually not visiting too much in this video, there are some new game rules in this update. Game rule Do Insomnia will turn Insomnia on and off. If Insomnia is turned off, phantoms will not spawn. Game rule Do Immediate Respawn will either force the player to respawn immediately or, by default, give the player an option. Game rule Drowning Damage can turn drowning damage on and off. Game rule Fall Damage can turn fall damage on and off. And finally, last but not least, game rule Fire Damage will turn fire damage on and off. If the player tries to use a bed in the daytime, the player can't sleep, but the player can now set their spawn on that bed. If I were to, unfortunately, pass away, I would respawn by that bed. And villagers can actually now be kicked out of beds by the player. All you need to do is walk over to a sleeping villager and click on the bed. And the villager is now removed from the bed. They will try to get back into that bed. Oh, villager, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Anyways, moving on to the final spot on today's list. The final spot is actually like a bunch of things. This update brings a lot of bug fixes. To showcase two big bug fixes here, banners now actually have a breaking animation now, which is really nice, and tridents actually look enchanted if they're enchanted now, which has never been a thing ever since the 1.13 update, and oh boy, that's a big one. I really like that. Now, of course, these aren't the only bug fixes. There are so many more, and in fact, some of these features that we just went over were actually bug fixes, like the rail one. As an honorary 24th spot on our list, technical changes and additions. There have been quite a few technical changes and additions in this update so far. I'm sure there will be even more up until the update's release. So that just about does it for what we have in Minecraft 1.15 so far. Now, there are some other features that have been announced, like the honey block, and even some leaked things like crystallized honey, but they're not in the update yet, so I figured we'd just hold off on those. You never know, maybe something will change. This is everything that we will be getting so far. Which feature is your favorite? Do you really like the bee stuff, or are you actually not very happy with the bee stuff? Share all of your thoughts down in the comments below. I hope you enjoyed this one. If you did, do me a favor, leave a like, subscribe, comment, notification, turn that thing on. And if you love what I do and you'd like to support me, I do have a Patreon. If you decide to support me, depending on your tier, you'll get access to the fan server, a special video dedication, or even a one-on-one call with me, yours truly, Waddles. Today's video is dedicated to the wonderful, amazing, cool guy on Moose. Check it out if you want, and then thanks for watching. Go have a good day. Goodbye, gamers. I'll see you in the next one.